You want to know about humanity? Let me tell you about the day we learned never to underestimate them again. My name is Vex-Korlath, and I was there when everything went sideways. Commander of the Third Fleet, destroyer of 17 worlds, conqueror of the Andromedan Spiral. Or at least, I was until I met her. The first attack on their pathetic little blue planet was supposed to be, well, let's just say it was supposed to be Tuesday. Easy. Simple. Boring, even. We'd done this dance 1,000 times before. Roll up with our ships, demand surrender, vaporize a few cities for emphasis, collect our new slaves, move on to the next system. Standard operating procedure for the hegemony, but humans? Oh, humans had other plans that I remember watching from my command deck as our first wave descended on their major population centers. New York, London, Beijing, Moscow. All those little ant hills they called cities. The bioscans showed 8 billion of them scurrying around down there like confused insects. Primitive weapon systems. No energy shields. No plasma cannons. Just kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. Adorable, really. Sir, my tactical officer Zeth Prime reported, his 3 eyes blinking in sequence, initial bombardment complete. Estimated casualties at 2.7 billion. Their military installations have been neutralized. I leaned back in my command throne, already bored. Any surrender signals? Negative, sir. But that's expected. The survivors are likely in shock. Shock. Right. That's what we thought it was. The surviving humans did what any reasonable species would do when faced with superior firepower. They went underground. Literally. Like the stubborn little rodents they resembled, they burrowed into their planet's crust, hiding in bunkers and caves and subway tunnels. We let them. Why waste ammunition hunting down every last one when they'd eventually starve or surrender? That was our first mistake. See, while we were patting ourselves on the back for another successful conquest, something interesting was happening down in those tunnels. The humans weren't just hiding. They were planning. Learning. Adapting. And apparently, they were very, very angry. The second attack came 3 months later. Standard cleanup operation. Flush out the remaining resistance, round up the survivors for processing. I assigned it to my youngest captain, Mortelix. Kid was eager to prove himself, and honestly, what could go wrong? It was just cleanup duty against a broken species, famous last words, as the humans might say that I was enjoying a victory feast on my flagship when the distress signals started coming in. At first, just scattered reports. Transport ships going dark. Patrol squadrons losing contact. Nothing too alarming. Space is dangerous, after all. Equipment fails. Accidents happen, but then Captain Mortelix himself came on the comm, and I could hear something in his voice I'd never heard before from one of my officers. Fear. Commander Vex-Korlath, his voice crackled through the speakers, distorted by atmospheric interference. We have a situation down here. I set down my goblet of fermented Andromedan nectar. Define situation, Captain. The humans, sir. They're not fighting like they did before. They're different. Different how? I was getting annoyed. Mortelix was supposed to be one of my best young officers, not some trembling recruit afraid of primitive bipeds. They're coordinated now, sir. Organized. And they have weapons we've never seen before. Projectile systems that punch through our armor like it's made of paper. Explosive devices that seem to target our specific biology. Sir, I've lost half my ground forces in the last hour alone. I laughed. Actually laughed. Captain, you're telling me that a bunch of hairless apes with sticks and stones are giving the mighty hegemony military trouble? Perhaps you need to reconsider your tactical approach. There was a long pause. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Sir, they're not using sticks and stones anymore. They're using our own technology. Modified. Improved. Sir, I think they've been studying our wreckage from the first attack. That got my attention. I leaned forward in my throne. Explain. The weapons they're using, they're hybrid systems. Human engineering combined with our plasma technology. Kinetic rounds wrapped in energy fields. Explosive compounds that interact with our shield frequencies. Sir, it's like they've spent the last 3 months reverse engineering everything we left behind. I felt the first cold tendril of unease creep up my spine. That's impossible. Their technology is centuries behind ours. They don't have the knowledge base to understand our systems, let alone modify them. Tell that to my dead soldiers, sir. The comm went silent for a moment, then exploded with noise. Weapons fire, screaming, the distinctive whine of energy weapons discharging. And underneath it all, something that made my blood run cold. Human voices. Not panicked or desperate like they should have been. Calm. Professional. Coordinated. Team 7, flank left. Use the plasma charges on that walker. Copy that. Team 3, suppressing fire on the dropship. Don't let them retreat. Roger. Targeting their communication array now. They were talking like soldiers. Like professionals. Like they'd been doing this for years instead of months. Captain Mortelix, report. I barked into the comm. His response came back broken, panicked. They've overrun our forward positions. Sir, they're moving with military precision. Someone's been training them. Someone who understands our tactics. That's impossible. There are no other species in this sector who would dare interfere with hegemony operations. Then explain how they knew exactly where to hit our command structure. How they knew our patrol routes. How they're countering every tactical maneuver in our playbook. I was about to respond when another voice cut through the comm channel. Human. Female. Speaking perfect hegemony standard. This is Colonel Maya Santos of the United Earth Resistance. To the alien scum listening to this frequency, you took everything from us. Our families. Our homes. Our future. But you made one critical error. I found myself leaning closer to the speaker, despite every instinct telling me to cut the channel. You left survivors. And we've spent every waking moment since your first attack preparing for this day. We studied your technology. We learned your language. We mapped your tactics. And now? Now we're going to show you what happens when you corner a species that has spent its entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of warfare. The channel went dead. I sat there in my command throne, staring at the silent communicator, my mind racing. 3 months. They'd had 3 months to prepare. 3 months to study our technology. 3 months to plan their revenge, and judging by the scream still echoing from the planet's surface, they'd used that time well. Sir, my communications officer interrupted my thoughts. We're receiving casualty reports from all ground teams. Losses are significant. Define significant. He swallowed hard. 73% and climbing, sir. 73% casualties against a species we dismissed as primitive savages. I felt my confidence cracking like ice under pressure. Sir, another officer called out, long-range sensors are picking up movement on the planet's surface. Multiple launch signatures. Launch signatures? They don't have space-capable weapons. They do now, sir. I watched in growing horror as the tactical display lit up with dozens of incoming projectiles. Not the crude chemical rockets I'd expected, but sophisticated guided missiles trailing the distinctive energy signatures of modified hegemony propulsion systems. Evasive maneuvers. I shouted. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Too late. The first missile impacted the hull of the destroyer Eternal Victory. The explosion that followed wasn't the simple chemical blast I'd anticipated. It was a cascading plasma detonation that tore through the ship's armor like tissue paper. How? I whispered, watching one of my finest warships break apart in the void. How did they learn to do that? The answer came from my science officer, his voice shaking. Sir, preliminary analysis suggests they've weaponized our own shield harmonics against us. The warheads are designed to create a resonance cascade in our hull plating. I stared at him. You're telling me they've learned to turn our own defensive systems into weapons? In 3 months? It appears so, sir. Another explosion lit up the darkness as the cruiser Bone Crusher suffered the same fate. Then another. And another. Sir, my tactical officer shouted over the noise of alarms and damage reports. We have incoming transmissions from the surface. It's the human leader again. Put her through, I snarled, my earlier confidence replaced by cold fury. The face that appeared on my main display was not what I'd expected. Colonel Maya Santos was young, perhaps 30 by human standards. Her dark hair was pulled back in a military style, and her brown eyes held the kind of cold determination I'd only seen in the most seasoned hegemony commanders. But what struck me most was her smile. It wasn't triumphant or savage. It was professional. Businesslike. Commander Vex-Korlath, she said, as if we were old friends meeting for afternoon refreshments. I believe we need to talk. You think this changes anything? I spat. You may have caught us off guard, but you're still just one primitive planet against the entire hegemony fleet. Her smile widened. Oh, Commander. You still don't understand, do you? This isn't just about one planet anymore. She gestured off-screen, and the camera pulled back to reveal what looked like a military command center. Dozens of humans worked at stations covered in displays showing star charts, fleet positions, and tactical data. But it was the figure standing beside Colonel Santos that made my blood freeze. A hegemony officer. One of ours. Very much alive, and very much cooperating. Allow me to introduce Captain Thekvas, Santos said pleasantly. He was the sole survivor of your scout ship that crashed in our Pacific Ocean last year. Fascinating fellow. Very talkative once we got to know each other. Captain Thekvas stepped forward, his shame evident even across species lines. Commander, I had no choice. They were going to execute me. Instead, Santos continued, we offered him a deal. His life and freedom in exchange for information. Military protocols. Fleet compositions. Tactical doctrines. Surprisingly detailed star charts showing the locations of every hegemony installation within 50 light-years. The bottom fell out of my world. Everything. They knew everything. But wait, Santos said, holding up one finger like a teacher making a point, there's more. See, Captain Thekvas here also provided us with something even more valuable. Communication codes. My tactical display suddenly lit up with new contacts. Dozens of them. Human ships, broadcasting hegemony identification signals, moving through our outer territories with complete impunity. Surprise. Santos said brightly. While you were patting yourselves on the back for conquering Earth, we were busy conquering you. Your supply depots, your repair stations, your communication relays. All gone. Oh, and those 17 worlds you were so proud of conquering? We've been in contact with their resistance movements. Turns out, they're very interested in human weapons technology. I could only stare as report after report flooded in. Hegemony installations throughout the sector were going dark. Supply convoys were disappearing. Colonial governors were reporting massive uprisings armed with impossible weapons. You see, Commander, Santos continued conversationally, you made a fundamental error in judgment. You assumed we were just another primitive species to be conquered and enslaved. But humans, well, we're something special. We don't just adapt to survive. We adapt to win. This is impossible, I whispered. Is it? Let me explain something about human nature, Commander. When you attack us, when you hurt us, when you try to break us, we don't just get angry. We get creative. And creative humans with 3 months to plan their revenge? Well, that's something the galaxy has never seen before. The display shifted to show the tactical situation across the entire sector. Red markers indicated hegemony losses. Blue markers showed human force positions. The red was disappearing faster than I could track. So here's what's going to happen, Santos said, her smile never wavering. You're going to order the immediate withdrawal of all hegemony forces from this sector. You're going to release all prisoners and slaves taken from the worlds you've conquered. And you're going to deliver a message to your Hegemony Council. I found my voice. What message? Her smile finally faded, replaced by an expression of absolute steel. Tell them that humanity is no longer just defending itself. We're expanding. And any species that tries to stand in our way will learn exactly why evolution spent 4 billion years teaching us how to fight. The transmission ended, leaving me staring at a blank screen. Outside my viewport, the last of my fleet was burning. 6 months later, I was sitting in a detention cell on what used to be our most secure prison station, wondering how everything had gone so spectacularly wrong. The irony wasn't lost on me. This facility had held thousands of human prisoners after our first attack. Now it held exactly one hegemony commander, me. The cell was comfortable enough, I suppose. Better than what we'd given our prisoners, which Colonel Santos had pointed out with that infuriating smile of hers during my interrogation. She'd made it sound like a personal favor. We're not barbarians, Commander, she'd said, adjusting something on her tablet. Unlike some species I could mention. The door to my cell hissed open, and speak of the devil, there she was. Maya Santos, now apparently calling herself Fleet Admiral Santos, if the insignia on her modified uniform meant anything. She carried a steaming cup of something that smelled suspiciously like actual coffee. Good morning, Vex, she said cheerfully, settling into the chair across from my bunk. Sleep well? I glared at her. I am Commander Vex-Korlath of the 3rd Fleet. I demand to speak with a representative of the Hegemony Council. Oh, about that. She took a sip of her coffee and made a satisfied sound. Funny thing happened while you were sleeping. The Hegemony Council voted to expel you from the military. Posthumously, actually. They declared you dead along with the rest of your fleet. I felt my blood temperature drop several degrees. What? Political necessity, I'm afraid. Can't have it getting out that an entire hegemony fleet was defeated by what they keep calling primitive humans. Bad for morale across the Empire. So officially, you died heroically in battle against a massive alien invasion force. Very dramatic. They're probably building statues. She pulled out her tablet and showed me a news feed. There I was, immortalized in propaganda art, dying nobly while defending hegemony space against some fictional alien armada. The heroic sacrifice of Commander Vex-Korlath and his brave crew. This is insane, I muttered. Is it? Your leaders would rather lie to their own people than admit they lost to humans. Tells you everything you need to know about the hegemony, doesn't it? She had a point, which annoyed me almost as much as her smug expression. So what happens now? I asked. You execute me? Turn me into another propaganda piece? Santos laughed, a genuinely amused sound. Execute you? Vex, you're the most valuable asset we have. You're going to help us win this war. I will never betray the hegemony. You already have, she said mildly. Just by talking to me. Every conversation we've had has given us more insight into hegemony psychology, tactics, and political structure. Did you know you unconsciously reveal classified information when you're angry? It's fascinating. I opened my mouth to protest, then closed it. How many times had she interrogated me? How many casual conversations had we had? What had I let slip without realizing it? Don't look so worried, she continued. We're not asking you to actively betray your people. We're just asking you to watch. Watch what? She stood up and gestured toward the viewport. The future. Outside, space was filled with ships. Not hegemony vessels, but something new. The hulls had the sleek lines of human engineering, but they bristled with energy weapons and shield generators that were clearly based on our technology. Hybrid designs that looked like they'd been built by someone who understood both technologies intimately. Beautiful, aren't they? Santos said. We call them Unity-class vessels. Human innovation, hegemony technology, and engineering principles borrowed from 6 different species. Including some very helpful suggestions from former prisoners who decided they preferred freedom to slavery. I stared at the ships. There were dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. How is this possible? It's been 6 months. You can't build a fleet in 6 months. Can't we? You know what's funny about humans, Vex? We're really, really good at making friends. Especially with people who've been oppressed by the same enemy. She tapped her tablet, and the display changed to show a star map. Blue markers indicated human-controlled systems. There were far more than there should have been. The Arconi were the first to join us, she said conversationally. Remember them? You enslaved their world about 50 years ago. Turns out they never stopped fighting. They just got better at hiding it. When we showed them how to modify plasma weapons for their specific physiology, well, let's just say the hegemony garrison didn't stand a chance. Another tap. More blue markers appeared. Then the Velthari. Interesting species. They're natural engineers. Give them our manufacturing techniques and their metallurgy knowledge, and suddenly we can build ships twice as fast as anyone thought possible. Another tap. The blue was spreading like an infection across the map. Oh, and the Keth. Now they were a surprise. Pacifists, your file said. Turns out they're only pacifist toward species that aren't actively enslaving them. Who knew? I watched in growing horror as system after system lit up blue. This is impossible. The hegemony has controlled this sector for centuries. Controlled through fear, Santos corrected. Fear only works until someone shows people they can fight back and win. Then it becomes rage. And rage, properly directed, can move mountains. She walked over to the viewport and gazed out at her fleet. Do you want to know the really funny part, Vex? We learned it from you. What do you mean? Your initial attack on Earth. You didn't just kill people randomly. You targeted specific locations. Military bases, government centers, communication hubs. You were trying to break our command structure and leave us leaderless. Classic hegemony doctrine, according to our friend Captain Thekvas. I winced at the mention of that traitor's name. But here's the thing about humans, she continued. We don't just have one command structure. We have thousands. Governments, militaries, corporations, criminal organizations, religious groups, social movements. You cut off one head, and 10 more appear. It's not a bug in our system, Vex. It's a feature. She turned back to me, and I saw something in her eyes that chilled me more than her words. Absolute certainty. So when you destroyed our governments, our militaries stepped up. When you crippled our militaries, our corporations took over. When you targeted our corporations, our criminal network started running things. You didn't break our command structure. You just made it more flexible. And now? I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. Now we're teaching that flexibility to everyone else. The Arconi used to have a rigid caste system. Made them easy to control once you removed their leaders. But humans don't really do rigid social structures. We're too chaotic for that. So we taught them how to be chaotic too. She pulled up another display, this one showing casualty reports. Hegemony losses were staggering. The Velthari were easy to pacify because they thought in terms of individual worlds, individual colonies. We taught them to think in terms of networks. Interconnected systems. Mutual support. More reports. More losses. The Keth were harmless because they refused to use violence even in self-defense. We didn't change that. We just showed them that there are many ways to fight without directly harming anyone. Economic warfare. Information campaigns. Psychological operations. Turns out pacifists make excellent spies. I slumped back on my bunk, the full scope of what she was describing finally hitting me. You're not just fighting the hegemony. You're changing how everyone fights. Exactly. She clapped her hands together like a teacher whose slow student had finally grasped a difficult concept. The hegemony system works because it assumes every species will react predictably to conquest. Submit or die. Those are the only options you offer. They're the only rational options. For species that think like you, maybe. But what happens when you encounter species that don't think rationally? Species that see a third option? What third option? Her smile was back, and it was terrifying. Win. The door chimed, and another human entered. This one was older, with gray hair and the kind of scars that came from actual combat. He whispered something to Santos, and her expression grew serious. Well, Vex, it looks like you're about to get a front-row seat to history in the making. What's happening? The hegemony's first fleet just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of this system. 500 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts. They're here to retake this station and, quote, eliminate the human infestation once and for all. I felt a moment of hope. The first fleet was the hegemony's most powerful force. Surely they could handle whatever these humans had cobbled together. 500 ships, I said. How many do you have? In this system? About 30. My hope flared. Then you're finished. Are we? She walked back to the viewport and pointed. Vex, I want you to watch very carefully. This is going to be educational. I moved to the viewport, despite myself curious to see how this would end. 30 human ships against 500 hegemony vessels. Even with their modifications, the odds were impossible. That's when I saw them. Ships were emerging from hyperspace all around the system. Not human ships. Ships I recognized from a dozen different species. Arconi patrol boats. Velthari cruisers. Keth support vessels. And others. Species I didn't even recognize. What is this? I whispered. This, Santos said proudly, is what happens when you teach oppressed peoples that they can win. The first fleet isn't facing 30 human ships, Vex. They're facing 300 ships from 20 different species, all using modified technology, all coordinated by human tactical doctrine, and all very, very angry about centuries of hegemony rule. The battle began moments later. And it wasn't really a battle at all. It was a demonstration. The hegemony ships moved in traditional formation, expecting a conventional engagement. Instead, they found themselves facing something they'd never encountered before. Coordinated attacks from multiple species, each using tactics specifically designed to exploit known weaknesses in hegemony technology. Arconi fighters swarmed the dreadnoughts, too small and fast for the heavy weapons to track. Velthari ships launched specially designed missiles that turned hegemony shields against their own hulls. Keth vessels jammed communications while other species hammered the confused formations with concentrated fire, and through it all, human voices coordinated the attack with cold professionalism. Alpha Wing, target their command ship sensor array. Beta Wing, follow up with plasma charges on their engine blocks. Gamma Wing, keep those fighters busy while Charlie Wing flanks around their formation. I watched 500 years of hegemony naval doctrine crumble in less than an hour. Ships that had terrorized 100 worlds were being torn apart by species they dismissed as inferior. The mighty First Fleet, pride of the hegemony, was being destroyed by former slaves using their own weapons against them. How? I asked quietly. Santos glanced at me, then back at the battle. Simple. We listened to them. Every species the hegemony conquered had ideas about how to fight you. Tactics you'd never seen because you never gave them a chance to use them. We just put all those ideas together and gave them the tools to make them work. The last hegemony dreadnought exploded in a cascade of plasma fire, and the surviving ships began to retreat. But they weren't moving toward hyperspace. They were surrendering. "Attention hegemony vessels," came a voice over the communications channel. "This is Admiral Chen of the Unity Fleet. Stand down and prepare to be boarded. Any ship that attempts to flee will be destroyed. You have 60 seconds to comply. Admiral Chen." Another human name to add to my nightmares. "We're not conquerors, Vex," Santos said quietly. "We're liberators. Those crews down there? Most of them are just soldiers following orders, same as you were. We'll give them the same choice we gave you." "What choice?" "Join us, go home, or spend the rest of the war in comfortable detention. No executions. No torture. No slavery. Just a choice." I stared at her. "You're serious. Dead serious. You see, that's another thing humans are good at. We're really good at turning enemies into allies. It's how we survived on our own planet for so long. Every war we ever fought, we learned something from our enemies. Every enemy we defeated, some of them ended up fighting alongside us in the next war." She turned away from the viewport and headed for the door. "The hegemony rules through fear and oppression. We're offering something different. Hope. Freedom. The chance to be part of something better. And if the Hegemony Council refuses to surrender?" She paused at the door, her hand on the control panel. "Then we'll keep expanding until there's no hegemony left to surrender. One system at a time. One world at a time. One choice at a time." The door opened, and she stepped through, then looked back at me. "Think about it, Vex. Your empire is crumbling. Your people are abandoning you. Your enemies are becoming stronger every day. How long do you think this can last?" She started to leave, then stopped. "Oh, and Vex? Tomorrow we're having a briefing about the next phase of operations. You're invited to observe if you want. I think you'll find it very illuminating." After she left, I stood at the viewport for a long time, watching the aftermath of the battle. Human ships were moving among the debris, rescuing survivors from both sides. Hegemony and Unity crews working together to save lives. It should have been impossible. Everything I'd been taught about warfare, about conquest, about the natural order of things said this couldn't work. You couldn't build an alliance from dozens of different species. You couldn't coordinate military operations across such diverse groups. You couldn't turn enemies into friends, but here it was, happening right in front of me, and for the first time since this all began, I found myself wondering, what if the humans were right? What if there really was a better way? Outside my viewport, the stars looked different somehow. Less like points of light marking hegemony territory, and more like destinations. Places where anything might be possible, places where even an old enemy might find a new purpose. Tomorrow, I decided, I would attend that briefing. It was time to see what the future looked like.